Hiya! Back again for the second part of chapter 6. Do you remember Stig and Barney are at the bottom of the pit in those horrid man's car, the thieves that came and took all the stuff from Granny's house in the suitcases? And then the car went over the edge of the pit and they've covered it with all the leaves, haven't they? So they're hidden and they're inside it. And the two voices faded away as the men were walking into town because they couldn't see where their car was. Okay, so shall we see what happens next? We came to a little dot like that, you see, so I took a break. So I should be able to read to the end of the chapter this time. Okay, so Granny and Lou were back from shopping when Barney struggled in through the front gate carrying the two heavy suitcases full of silver. Barney! What on earth have you been up to? Granny exclaimed. I've brought your spoons and forks back, Granny. You see, two men came to do the television. I mean, that's what they said, but they were thieves really, and I was up the tree, but me and Stig chased them away and I let their car go over into the chalk pit and it's there now with all the treasure in it. Well, you have been having fun, said Granny. Now, let's have tea, shall we? Lay the table, Lou, and Barney, go and wash your hands. Look at them. Do you think Granny believes Barney? I don't think she does. Lou started laying the table. Where are the teaspoons, Granny? She asked. In the usual place, I suppose, dear, said Granny from the kitchen. Barney put his hand to his mouth. No, they're not, Granny, he said. They're hanging on the fence in Mr. Tickle's field. What? Exclaimed Granny. Really, Barney? That's naughty. You know you mustn't take the silver for games. But I didn't take them, Granny, Barney protested. It was the television man and Stig was running after him with a club and I tried to stop him because I thought he wasn't a thief. But he took his coat off and left it hanging on the fence and the spoons fell out. I thought he was going to have a picnic at first, but then I knew they were yours. I'll go and fetch them. And he ran out. When Barney got back, there was a policeman at the door talking to Granny. She looked worried. What's this about thieves, Sonny? Asked the policeman. Yes, I saw them up the tree. I was up the tree and one of them went into the house and I went to fetch my friend Stig and me and Stig had a fight with them and they ran away and the teaspoons fell out and the car was full of treasure. The policeman scratched his head. Ah, now, a car, you say. Just where might this car be? Barney stood on one leg. Well, I thought perhaps I could drive it to the police station, but it went backwards over the cliff, and Stig thought it was dead and started skinning it, and then he buried it. But I couldn't help it, I promise. The policeman was trying to write all this down in a notebook, but when he got to the part about skinning and burying the car, he stopped writing and looked hard at Barney. You wouldn't be making this up, would you, son? He said sternly. I'm afraid my grandson has a very strong imagination, said Granny. But I'm telling the truth, Granny, I promise, said Barney. Perhaps the little boy would like to show me where this alleged treasure is, ma'am, suggested the policeman. Yes, yes, cried Barney. It's just down the lane. Come on. And he took the policeman by the hand and pulled him through the front gate and down the lane, explaining as they went. It's all in the bottom of the car, the treasure. Or, well, it's in the top of the car, I suppose, because the car's upside down in the bottom of the pit. And there he is, look. He's off down the lane with the policeman. Can you see? There's the policeman and there's Barney. And they're off down the lane to the pit to go and see if they can find the car. Do you think the car will still be there? Do you think the treasure will still be there? Do you think Stig might have done something with it? Oh, I don't know. Let's read and see. He led the way to the top of the hill where the car had gone over and pointed. It's down there, he said. The policeman looked over. I can't see nothing, he said. Of course not, exclaimed Barney. We buried it. Come on down and see. The policeman looked more and more disbelieving. Look, son, he said. There's 3 houses been burgled in the district, and it's my job to catch the thieves and get the valuables back. And I haven't got a lot of time to waste. What about this treasure of yours? It's down there, insisted Barney. I'll show it to you if you just come down. He led the way round the top of the pit to the way in. It was getting dark now, and the policeman took an electric torch from his pocket. They clambered. I suppose that would be a battery torch nowadays, wouldn't it? Not electric. Not sure. They clambered over the heap of rubbish, and Barney moved aside the branches that hid the door of the upturned car. In there, he said. The policeman shone his torch inside. There was a terrible mess of ripped leather, broken glass from the windows, scattered stuffing from the seats and bare springs. No sign of the treasure. The policeman sat down on an old wash tub and took off his helmet. He looked quite like an ordinary man. "What's your name, son?" he asked quite kindly. Barney told him. "Listen to me, young Barney," said the policeman. "When I was a youngster, I used to have what your granny calls a strong imagination too. Used to play cops and robbers, and I can tell you it was a lot more exciting and a lot more fun than being a real copper, which I am now. So I'm not blaming you, understand? You imagined you had a fight with the two robbers, see? You imagined this bit of old junk, what's been here for years, was a car that went over the cliff. Isn't that it? You wasn't telling lies because you thought it was true. But that's it, isn't it? It never really happened, eh?" Barney stood there dumbly. If a grown-up said so, and such a kind grown-up, and a policeman too, perhaps you could imagine fights with robbers and cars going over cliffs. Perhaps he just imagined Stig. He was looking miserably into the darkness of the pit and was just about to nod his head and agree with all the policeman was saying when he saw in the far corner of the pit a flicker of light. Stig's den. He scrubbed away some tears that had got into his eyes and said firmly, "It did happen, and I know where the treasure is." And he went scampering away along the gloomy bottom of the pit towards the den. He knew his way pretty well now, even in the dark, but as he went, he kicked cans and rattled old sheets of iron as much as he could. He wanted to give Stig warning that they were coming. He felt it would be too much trying to explain Stig to the policeman, even if Stig was there in front of his eyes. He heard the policeman coming along behind him, making even more noise, and he was almost sure he heard a scuffle and a rustle that was Stig hiding himself in his favourite bramble patch. When he got to the entrance of the den, well, he was ahead of the policeman, and there was no sign of Stig in the bright firelight inside. He stood by the entrance and waved the policeman in. The policeman doubled himself up and crawled in through the low entrance. Then he gasped. It looked like Aladdin's cave. Necklaces and bracelets hung, winking from the roof of the shelter. The floor of the cave was carpeted with the skin of the car seats. Stig's bed was made up with padding from the seats and covered with fur coats, and above it, stuck into the wall, was a driving mirror and a set of switches and buttons saying headlights and wiper and heater, and all around the floor, stuck into the ground and set out like tin soldiers on parade, were troops of silver spoons and forks. Stig had been enjoying himself with all that treasure, so he had taken it out of the car, hadn't he? And he'd made his den look fabulous with it. "Well, I'm blessed!" exclaimed the policeman. He took out his notebook. "I'll take it all back, Barney, my boy, and if you just help me tick off in my book all this stolen property which someone has so kindly put out on parade for us, we'll get it back to its rightful owners all the quicker. And I shouldn't be surprised if there was a reward for a bright boy at the end of all this." Barney started to explain all over again what had happened, but the policeman said he'd had a tiring day and he'd rather not have more explanations. But that time when he went home with his grandmother's when he went home from his grandmother's house, he took a brand new bicycle with him. And Stig? Well, Stig was disappointed at not being allowed to keep all the treasure, but before he went, Barney found some spanners in the wreck of the car and he taught Stig how to use them. Stig was very proud of his necklace of steel nuts strung on wire cable and his bangles of piston rings. Do you know what a piston ring is? Do you know where that comes from? Do you reckon you could find out? Oh, something to do with a car engine, I think. That's the end of that chapter. And the next one is chapter 7, and it's called Party Manners. And I think we're going to read that tomorrow because Nanny's very, very tired today, been very busy. So I'll read that for you tomorrow. And you have a good night's sleep. I hope you enjoyed that story so far. And I'll see you soon. Love and hugs and kisses and